Every year, there are teams that are way ahead of schedule and make the playoffs even though many of us would not have expected them to, like the Seahawks this past season and the Eagles the season before. But that's not what we're going to be talking about today. Dear friends, we're going to be talking about something that is far more specific, teams that have won the Super Bowl despite not winning their division. This is such a rare occurrence that since 1975, only 7 teams have been able to achieve this. And I've broken these teams up into 3 categories. Teams that I'm not surprised with at all. They didn't win their division, and I understand why. And they won the Super Bowl, and I understand why. Then there's teams that I'm not surprised they won the Super Bowl because they were awesome, but I'm surprised they didn't win their division because, again, they were awesome. And then there's the last group, which is really only one team, where I'm not surprised that they didn't win their division, and I am surprised that they won the Super Bowl. And the idea is that I'm going to be able to find trends within these teams and be able to predict 1, 2, maybe 3 teams that could fit that mold this upcoming season. I'm also not going to be including the 1982 season because of the players' strike, which shortened the season and forced the league to put 16 teams into the playoffs. Keep in mind, there were only 28 teams in the NFL at this time. So there weren't even divisions. They just seeded them all by their ranking in their conference. So it really doesn't work for what we're trying to do here. Now, before we get into my first category, I do want to give a shout out to teams that made it to the Super Bowl without winning their division, but ended up losing, because it's still impressive that they got there. They just couldn't quite finish the job. That's the 1975 Cowboys, 85 Patriots, 92 Bills, and 1999 Titans. So 12 total teams that have made the Super Bowl without winning their division. 5 that lost, 7 that won. And we're going to start with 3 teams that won the Super Bowl, but I was absolutely shocked to learn did not win their division. The first team that I want to talk about is the 1997 Denver Broncos. They were 12-4, second in their division, and of course went on to win the Super Bowl. And this team was really special, not only because they won the Super Bowl in the year that we're referencing, but also they went back-to-back and won it again in 98 during Terrell Davis's MVP year. But despite TD not winning MVP in 97, this was still the #1 offense in football and a top 10 defense. And one thing we frequently talk about is how you need a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense to be a Super Bowl contender. And if you happen to be #1 in either of those things, you can probably kiss that ring already. And I know the Packers were good. Obviously, they went to the Super Bowl that year, but man, I am shocked that the Broncos were such big underdogs in that game. Now, the second team that I want to look at is the 1980 Oakland Raiders. They went 11-5, again, second in the division, and of course, like every team here, won the Super Bowl. Now, they actually had the same record as the division-winning Chargers, which means this came down to a tiebreaker. Now, the reason I'm surprised that this team didn't win their division is because their defense was a turnover machine. So not only did this defense not allow a lot of points and not allow a lot of yards, they forced 52 turnovers over the course of a 16-game season. They averaged over 3 turnovers per game. And then in the Super Bowl, they forced 4 of them. Between Lester Hayes getting 13 picks and you having Ted Hendricks at linebacker, no one was stopping this defense. Or I guess no one could get past this defense because the defense does the stopping. You get the idea. They were freaking loaded. Then the third team that I want to look at is the 2000 Baltimore Ravens, who also had a fantastic defense. This is one of the greatest defenses of all time, and more so than the Raiders and more so than the Broncos. I am blown that this team did not win their division. Of course, this team won the Super Bowl. They're a historical defense with Ray Lewis and Rod Woodson. During that NFL regular season, they held 4 teams scoreless, and for reference, in 2022, only 4 teams were held scoreless all year. Now, to be fair, one of the teams that the Ravens held scoreless was the Cleveland Browns, and if you know, they were an expansion team at this point, so pretty much everyone held them scoreless. But they just completely wiped the floor with every offense they played. Now we're gonna take a look at teams that didn't surprise me one bit. I'm not surprised that they didn't win their division, and I'm not surprised that they won the Super Bowl. Starting with the 4th team in this series, the 2005 Pittsburgh Steelers that went 11-5, second in the division, and would you have guessed, won the Super Bowl. These early 2000 Steelers teams, 04, 05, this was kind of the foundation of building a future era, a new era of great Steelers defenses. We saw Troy Polamalu.
That's Palamalu, bro.
James Harrison, Ike Taylor. And at this point in time, Ben Roethlisberger was playing in his 2nd season in the NFL. Miami Redhawks legend, baby. But despite how good the Steelers team was, they had to deal with the Cincinnati Bengals in the regular season, because during this 2000s and 2010 stretch, the Bengals made the playoffs a lot. They lost in the playoffs a lot, but they made it a lot. And in this year, the Bengals had a tiebreaker over the Steelers for the division title, But the Bengals had a glaring flaw. Despite having some really nice pieces offensively, Carson Palmer and Ocho Cinco, their defense was the literal opposite of a bend don't break defense. They either stood their ground and forced a turnover, which they led the league in, or they shattered. Because outside of the turnovers that they accumulated throughout the season, their defense was near the bottom in yards and points allowed. So they were great in the regular season because they forced a ton of turnovers, but then they got to the playoffs, they played the Steelers, and all those turnovers disappeared. This isn't like that 1980s Raiders team. So then the Steelers actually have a great defense. Big Ben's in his zone, they go on, win the whole damn thing. Now the fifth team on my list is the 2010 Green Bay Packers, and I was texting Theo last night, and I'm like, oh my God, this defense is so underrated. I just need you to hear how nasty this defense is. This is the one time where Rodgers got the defense to come through for him. Charles Woodson, Clay Matthews, BJ Raji, AJ Hawk, Tramon Williams at the other corner spot, Cleveland Browns legend, by the way. It's just so easy for them to get lost in the wake of other great defenses that have happened in recent years. The Ravens, the Seahawks, the Broncos. But these guys were some dogs, man. And of course they had Rodgers, who is great. And Greg Jennings had a nice year too. But it's this defense where I'm like, yeah, this is why they won it all. But I think a big reason why they went 10-6 this year and weren't just like a complete powerhouse, despite having Rodgers and a great defense, is I look at their schedule and I'm like, there's a lot of games here where they kind of struggled offensively. But there were just so many teams that didn't have the firepower to hang with this defense, and especially the secondary, that when it came time for the playoffs, they just stopped everyone. And because Aaron Rodgers flipped the switch and had 3 touchdowns in almost every single game, they won the Super Bowl. So that brings us to team number 6 on my list, which is the 2020 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this team is so simple. Why did they not win their division? They couldn't beat the goddamn Saints, man. There was something about the Tom Brady era in Tampa Bay where they just could not beat the Saints. I don't understand it. I will never understand it. So the Saints ended up winning the division this year, but after the Bucs bye week, they went on an absolute rampage and they scored over 30 points in every single game from week 14 to the Super Bowl. Now, did they have to play the Saints in the playoffs? Yes. How did they win that one? I don't know. But I'm pretty sure there's a stat about how teams can't beat an opponent 3 times in one season. But regardless, this isn't about the Saints. Let's talk about the Buccaneers. Their front 7 was god tier. The run defense, next level. They had Ndamukong Suh, Jason Pierre-Paul, Levante David, Devin White, Shaq Barrett. It's like everyone managed to get their X factor or their superpower or their takeover this year. And they didn't even have Vita Vea. And they still demolished like every offensive line they played. But those pieces were around in 2019. Jameis Winston just threw 30 picks, and there's not much you can do about that. So obviously, it was the addition of Tom Brady and him playing at an MVP level and him bringing in Gronk, and they got Antonio Brown, who was a really good piece towards the end of the year for them. So like, yeah, no shit they won the Super Bowl. They just couldn't get one game on the Saints, so they couldn't win the division. And maybe the one caveat is like, oh, well, if they had played a healthy Chiefs team, it'd be a different story. They might not have won that Super Bowl. But like, man, they won by 22. What do you want them to do? They can't control who they play. And now we're gonna move on to the last team and the last category of my list. How in the world did the 2007 Giants manage to win the Super Bowl this year? I don't get it. This team went 10-6. I understand why they didn't win their division. They were 14th ranked in scoring offense, 16th in yards, 23rd in turnovers. Their defense was 17th ranked in scoring, 7th in yards, 22nd in turnovers. And it's not for a lack of talent that this Giants team had. They just more fit the bill of some of these teams that lost the Super Bowl that we talked about earlier. I honestly have no idea how they were able to win the Super Bowl. I mean, they played the best offense maybe ever. You know what? I'm just gonna phone a friend. I'm gonna call the biggest Giants fan that I know. So I'm here with, you all know him as Sneaky G-Man, our favorite Giants fan, to talk about the 2007 New York Giants season. It's the fact that they go against 3 of the top 5 offenses, the Cowboys, the Packers, and of course the Patriots. They're 7-point underdogs against the Cowboys, 7.5-point underdogs against the Packers, 12.5-point underdogs against the Patriots, and they beat all of them, right? They hold all of them to no more than 20 points. And the Cowboys game in particular was really jarring to me because the Cowboys for most of that season were shredding their opponents. Yeah. Shredding their opponents.
And they had home field throughout.
As a Giants fan, what happened that year?
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. I need my special guest if we're going to talk about the 07. Hold on. Here we go. We started off at the gate hot. I mean, 4-1. I'll never forget it. What stands out to me, first off, it was the way we won games. I mean, we kept it close throughout the year. Matter of fact, I hope you remember, it was that touchdown run in the rain at Buffalo. I mean, he ran us literally into the playoffs because we needed that game to clinch a spot. Now we clinched, and then the question was, as every media pundit, do you rest your players? And also, this was Tiki Barber's first year of retirement, so he was no longer part of the team. And I want to say this for the record, Tiki and myself, we're best friends now, okay? He was not my favorite Giant, but, up until last year, he was not my favorite Giant.
Yeah.
And I had since apologized for every bad thing I said about him. He felt that he had to retire so the Giants can move on, so the Giants can make that extra leap. And this was Strahan's final year as well. He didn't show up for OTAs. He didn't show up for mini camps. His first game was his first game of that year. Fast forward to the end of the season, and we're playing against the undefeated, unstoppable New England Patriots. They played in New York. They barely beat us. It was 35-31. That was the aha moment. I remember watching the American game, okay? And their whole thing was, this is the best the NFL has.
Against the perfect team, Eli Manning was nearly perfect, tying a career high with 4 touchdown passes.
And the Patriots' perfect season is very much in jeopardy. 20 seconds.
His counterpart faced more pressure than normal. In the end, the Giants won Tom Brady's respect, but not the game.
Well, if they play like they played tonight, the New York Giants can make some hay in the NFC playoffs.
When we played the Patriots, they were playing for a lot. For us, we were playing for nothing. And you're on the sideline thinking, this is the best the league has to offer. They've beaten everybody. You name it, they've beaten them. We're this close. Imagine if we played and there is everything is at stake, how well we could do.
There's no such thing as moral victories, but if there was such thing as a moral victory, it was this game. We were in the playoffs and we're playing in Tampa against Jeff Garcia and that offense. I was not worried. When you go, I mean, you're a Browns fan, so you probably know what I'm talking about. When you go into a game and you're like, I don't know about this one.
It's like most games I go into,
Right. So, but this game, I was like, people be like, oh, what do you think about it? Oh, we don't win in Tampa. I was already thinking of Dallas because that's where we're going to go against next. Moving on to the Dallas game. Now, one thing you don't want to do is to give a team that's hungry, which that 07 team was. They were hungry. Locker room material. And that's what the Dallas Cowboys did. Come to find out, Jerry had already put the NFC championship tickets in the players' locker room. And the first play, I remember this like it was 5 minutes ago. The first play, Eli hits Amani Toomer on like a 12-yard pass or whatnot. Brother turned around and took it to the house. It was just one of those games where you knew the last team that had the ball was going to win, was going to make an effort. And it's one of those teams that we just got hot at the right time. And when we got to the coldest game, one of the top 5 coldest games in NFL history in Green Bay, look, Blaiden, I'm going to tell you, a whole week, people asking me, what do you think about you guys? And, of course, when people ask me what I think about the Giants, you know what I'm going to say. Oh, we're going to win. I mean, that's the bottom line. But I knew Favre was going to give us one. And the whole game, there were no turnovers. This is a good trivia question that you can ask your friends, right? And a lot of people will get it wrong. Who caught Favre's last pass as a Packer? It was Corey Webster for the New York Football Giants. That was the one that I knew that he was going to give us. We were the 5th seed. We traveled each game, and now, of course, we're in Arizona. It's a neutral playing field. It was just a different feel. Like, we were destined. Like, this was going to be ours. And for the first 3 quarters, I mean, it was 7-3. David Tyree caught that touchdown in the back of the end zone. on a post, skinny post. And plus, David Tyree's story. Just, if anybody's watching, just go follow the man. And he has a podcast. Now, the helmet catch, yeah, Eli actually pointed it out, but I saw it happen live. So when he was dropping back to pass and he was coming out of the tangle, you know, the whole mob, if you will, he was going to throw the ball to O'Hara. That had been a penalty. Then he quickly realized it and, you know, backed up and threw that ball up there for Tyree to catch. And like, there's just moments in games that you know it's going to go the way you want it to go. Thank you so much for bringing me on. If anybody's in Arizona, go to Vista Haircutters. Tell Ryan I sent you, and he'll charge you full price. I mean, you know, he might charge you extra. Before you go, let's go Giants! Ow!
That was incredible. I honestly could have made an entire video just of that conversation, and honestly, I thought about it. But make sure you all go give him a follow. I will link all of his social media in the description. But I think this Giants team really sums up the common trend here, which is that all of these teams are really great at something, typically defense, but they get stuck in a really tough division where they either lose it by a game or by a tiebreaker, and then they just get hot at the right time and pick up any remaining slack in order to crush their opponents in the playoffs. So what team fits the mold for that this year? Well, Sneaky G, of course, thinks it's going to be the Giants, and how can I blame him? He's the biggest Giants fan in the world. But I honestly don't think it's that bad of an idea. They, of course, made the playoffs this year. Their defense is pretty good. The offense you would expect to continue to improve from last year. But I think the divisions, at least to look out for, are the AFC North and AFC East, because there are so many teams in there that could all make the playoffs, and any one of them could really make a push late in the season. The Browns aren't a terrible fit. The Bengals aren't a bad fit. I talked about how their secondary could be way underrated. The Ravens, of course, got way better this offseason. And then in the AFC East, there's the Jets, there's the Bills, there's the Dolphins. All of these teams are going to be competing with each other all year, but one of them could very easily pull ahead. I could see a healthy Dolphins team being really scary to face in the playoffs. And if you wanted to include the NFC East, because the Eagles lost their coordinators, it's not unthinkable they take a step back and maybe the Cowboys or the Giants are able to take the reins and win the NFC. And I know you all want me to put out a prediction into the world, but I just don't think I can pick between these 9 teams. So I'm going to leave it up to you all. Leave in the comments who you think is going to win the Super Bowl this year. But that's all that I have for you today. Thank you all for tuning in. And again, make sure you follow Sneaky G on all platforms. I will leave everything in the description. Thank you all for tuning in. And as always, I will catch you guys on the flippity flop.